You know, I love collecting comic books, and a lot of people do too, and some people are trying to get into collecting comic books and are kind of confused because we have singles, and digest-sized, and trade paperback, and we have hardcovers, and deluxe hardcovers, and omnibuses. But what does it all mean? What do all these terms correlate with each other? Why do publishers use one term for everything, but then sometimes use another term for others? I'm going to try to explain all that in one video. Let's see how I do. It's morphin' time! Hello, this is Soundout here, and today we're talking about comic books and the terms and terminology used with the formats. We're going to specifically talk about like Western comics, European comic style, not so much manga because that's a whole other can of worms, but we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. We'll go from Marvel to DC, we'll do indies, we'll do kind of the whole range of things. And the idea is that I want to try to simplify the collecting process, because I have a lot of people ask me, since I'm a huge comic collector, oh, what does it mean by omnibus? What does it mean by deluxe hardcover? That sort of thing. So what I've done for this video is I'm going to structure it where we talk about a term and then how it applies to multiple publishers, because some of the publishers use the same term for everything, and then other publishers like to use the same term for something completely different than another publisher. And specifically, I'm going to talk about Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, Boom Studios, and IDW. Because I feel like those are like the kind of the top line, you know, most output kind of companies. There are some other publishers, there are some other things, and that's just kind of becomes case by case. But I'm going to go kind of like the biggest publishers in the industry and the ones I can talk about easily. So we're going to do that. And the idea is that we're going to talk about each format independently, and then at the end I'll talk about publisher-specific formats, because some formats that only certain publishers do. But there's a lot of overlap and there's a lot of different terminology, so I want to make sure it is straightforward. Now, if you have any further questions, by all means hit up the comments and hit the like button if you enjoy this type of video and want to see more like it, or if you want to see me cover more comics, because comic videos are always kind of a 50-50 shot on the channel. So hit that like button, it really helps. Also, subscribe to the notification bell if you haven't already, if this is your first time on the channel. Really appreciate your support. We do a lot of types of videos on the channel that I think you will enjoy. I think on that note, we should get started with the most basic format, the one that's existed since the 1930s, the single-issue comic book. So pretty much every publisher still does single-issue comics. I think a lot of the major ones, it's a good way to do revenue. You know, a lot of people are buying things in trade paperbacks or collected editions nowadays, but single issue comics still have kind of their staple, and they help support local comic shops. So single issues still have a place, and some people swear by only collecting single issues, and that's totally valid. But yeah, your single issue comic, you know, every publisher pretty much has them. They're about, you know, your 20 to 30 pages. You have some publishers like Marvel and DC, they'll have ads in the books for other things, just kind of cross-sells or promotional things. Average price of a single issue comic nowadays is about $4 USD, which is made them harder to collect for a lot of people because they are, I wouldn't say it's an easy format to collect because the individual cover price, but it's still the easiest way to keep up with things as they're publishing. Because most single issue comics publish about one issue a month, so you get like once a month. You get, you know, your new issue, your next chapter in the story kind of thing. But a lot of single issue books are kind of written where it's like, oh yeah, these 5 or 6 issues make a complete story arc, and that is where we lead kind of to where I think the industry's like main focus is, even though we still get a lot of single issues, is that in the trade paperback format. But single issues, it's kind of like the, I don't want to say it's the old way to collect comics, but it kind of is. I still buy singles, but I think a lot of people have shifted over to collected editions, especially trade paperbacks. So like singles, pretty much every company publishes trade paperbacks. These have usually between 4 and 6 issues of the single issue book, or sometimes an original graphic novel in this size. It's about the same size as your single issue comic, and they're, you know, pretty relatively affordable. Most of these range from 15 to 20 bucks, depending on the page count, depending on the publisher. And yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of like one of the easiest ways to do it. So like, for example, this is a Green Arrow Volume 3. So you can see the 3 on the spine, and then, you know, that's the 3rd volume. You know, Marvel as well. Of course, that was DC. Here's Marvel. Here's just an example of one I've been reading lately. Marvel has a consistent spine design they've had since 2016. They have like this little character portrait piece and like the number at the bottom. So that's pretty nice. Looks really nice on a shelf. Image Comics does a cool thing with some of their titles, because a lot of creator-owned books. A lot of their titles, the first trade will only be $10, even though it's a full-size trade. And then the later ones are about $18 a piece. So it's kind of like an introductory price. You could try a series out for less. Like for Radiant Black here, Radiant Black Volume 1 was $10, and all the others have been $17 or $18. But yeah, you get kind of differences in paper quality. Like Marvel, I think, almost infamously uses a lot thinner paper in their trades. DC's been going back to kind of like an old matte print thing. Something like Image Comics, they put a little bit more higher quality paper into it. Again, being creator-owned books versus company-owned. And that's essentially the difference between, does the original creator still own the rights to the character, which at Image is the case, whereas like Marvel and DC own the rights to any characters made at their company. Dark Horse, they go for $20, and they're like 4 issues. I find they're not as good of a deal, but they are really nice paper stock, so that's pretty good. A lot of Dark Horse stuff are miniseries as well, and they're 4-issue miniseries. So sometimes it's like it's a 4-issue miniseries, $4 an issue. It's like $16 for the singles or $20 for the trade. So that's kind of thing that you look at. IDW as well are $20 volumes for about 4 issues. That's just kind of I think once you get outside the Marvel and DC realm, prices vary. But I also got to say the paper stock, at least on this Ninja Turtles, is pretty thick, so it's pretty nice. Boom Studios usually does 4-issue volumes. This is a 6-issue miniseries, so it's a little bit thicker. But they kind of have the same thing to IDW. Really nice, high-quality paper. Dynamite does about $18. This one, I believe, was a 4-issue series as well. This is a 4-issue miniseries for Elvira, but also pretty good paper stock. So it kind of varies. I find that Marvel and DC's trade paperbacks, not as high quality as some of the other publishers, but also the price is a little bit variant. So it's kind of like, I think, your standard sort of format to collect. It's the easiest to find. It's the least expensive in terms of collected editions. And there is some sequentiality to it, which I think is pretty nice. Now, something that's come up recently is the digest-sized book. So this is something that isn't at all publishers. I think it's pretty much just DC, Marvel, and IDW. So, for example, here is a collection of old Batman adventures, which are all ages appropriate books. This is recollecting some of the old 90s Batman Animated Series tie-ins. This was $10. It's a nice, it's like a trade paperback length paper-wise, but it is a much smaller size. So you can see compared to Elvira there. It's called a digest size. Now, DC has 2 different sizes. I see that they usually, when they do reprints, it's like this. But they have these young adult graphic novels, which are printed larger. This one is $17. This was an original story, Bad Dreamer Dreamer story. Highly recommended. Versus this collection. But you can see the trim size, but it's still not the size of a trade paperback. So that's what's kind of called digest size. So I've seen DC publish things in the smaller format a little bit, but for the most part, industry-wide, this is what your standard digest size is. And they're more aimed at the young adult readers, your teens to your young adults, more so than trade paperbacks are more aimed at, like, I guess, the adult market. Marvel does this as well, but with Marvel, like, for example, Web of Spider-Man was a all-ages book tying into the Avengers Campus ride for Spider-Man. This wasn't republished. This was done in single issues, but it wasn't republished at full trade paperback size. It was republished at digest size because it was an all-ages book. Boom Studios just started doing this with the Ranger Academy comic, where they published it at the smaller size. It's just a different market, and I think it's supposed to be a little bit easier for kids in school to carry in backpacks and stuff. IDW takes a similar format, like the Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles complete collection. These were originally published in full-size single issue and then full-size trade paperback, and now they are in digest size, but they're still pretty large. So you can see it's still smaller than a trade paperback, but these 3 are kind of in that. And the Ranger Academy trade paperback collections are digest sized. So I think this is kind of interesting. Also, if you are a collector, these do take up a lot less shelf space vertically. So all my digest size books I have on a little separate shelf just because they fit somewhere else. But it's a nice format if you have kids or teens trying to get into comics. It kind of, I think, makes it a little bit easier, a little bit more wieldy, and a pretty good price value for page count to price. So now we're going to get into something that's a little bit more varied. Trade paperbacks, digest size, single issues, they're all kind of same between. This is where we're going to talk about thick trades. So basically, your trade paperback that we looked at before, the standard size, usually about 6 issues. Thick trades can be anywhere from 12 to 20 issues. But you can see that they're a lot thicker, higher price point as well. So for example, this Blue Beetle is $30 because it contains issues 1 through 12. Now, this is kind of where you get older books being reprinted. This is the 2006 Blue Beetle, reprinted in 2023 or 2022, I believe. And that is going to be like a recollection. But it's full size and it's, full standard size. And I think that it's kind of more collector aimed, right? So kind of bring books back into print. DC has a couple different variants of this. So Blue Beetle Book 1 is the first 12 issues of the 2006 Blue Beetle comic, whereas Birds of Prey, The End of the Beginning, is issues 113 to 127 of Birds of Prey, the first series. But there's no volume number on it, and these weren't released sequentially. They released this one, and then there's still like 2 more they've had come out. So like Gail Simone's Birds of Prey run, they didn't do volume numbers, so you have to kind of look up, figure out, what issues are included to figure out what order to put them in for reading and for on your shelf. I much prefer this like book 1, book 2, book 3 format because that makes it much simpler. Volume numbers, I think, are essential, or even if it had like a year number on it, which we'll talk about that kind of format in a little bit. But there's kind of DC's 2 variants of that. Now, Marvel also does a similar thing where they recollect a series run in a new trade. She-Hulk by Charles Soule and Javier Pulido. This was a collection of the She-Hulk series by Charles Soule and Javier Pulido. So it's a creator-based book. And a lot of Marvel, they will renumber when a new creative team comes in. So that's why a lot of their collections are more creator-based for the modern era. So this is a complete collection of that run that was issues 1 through 12, plus 2 extra special issues that tie into things that they also worked on. And this was $35. Not as thick as that Blue Beetle, because Marvel does use glossy paper versus the matte paper DC uses now. So you get just a different thickness. But this is kind of nice because if you didn't get the trade paperbacks from before and they're out of print, now you can get that series for your collection. And it kind of has a nice, like, custom designed spine for that run. But the other type of format that Marvel does for thick trades is the saga collections, which are usually tied into MCU projects. Like, for example, Jane Foster, the saga of Valkyrie, came out around the time of Thor, Love and Thunder. This one is kind of a random collection. It has, like, the end of Jane's time as Mighty Thor, plus the Jane Foster Valkyrie series, and some extra stuff. And this is a character-focused collection. And the saga collections have wild variants in how they're done. Sometimes it's just, here's one comic reprinted for this character that the MCU thing's based off of. Sometimes it's a collection of stories. This one was $40, which is another issue I have with Marvel, because it isn't that much thicker than the She-Hulk. But that is kind of like how that goes. But then there's other saga collections, which are sort of what you would expect. Like Vision and Scarlet Witch, the saga of Wanda and Vision, is the Vision and Scarlet Witch miniseries, the one from 1982 that was 4 issues, and the 12-issue 1985 Vision and Scarlet Witch miniseries. So this is more of like almost an epic collection for Vision and Scarlet Witch. And we'll talk about what an epic collection is in a little bit. Okay, so now we get to some confusion. Boom Studios also does thick trade paperbacks. This one in particular, this Bill and Ted one, was $30. Pretty nice, pretty thick. Recollecting stuff. They did these for a few of their titles. This Bill and Ted Omnibus is all 3 of the Bill and Ted miniseries that Boom published. Notice the term Omnibus. A lot of times, Omnibus is a oversized hardcover, very thick, collection, which we'll talk about. But sometimes it's a paperback, like at Boom Studios. So that's where some of the confusion comes in. But this is just a thick, standard-sized trade paperback of all the Bill and Ted comics that Boom published. And Boom also has this format called Archive. So, for example, this is the Bill and Ted's excellent comic book. It's most of it, minus one issue that wasn't done by Evan Dorkin. This was reprinting the Marvel series from the 90s, and so they use the term archive. But you can kind of see that archive means like before Boom, and Omnibus is kind of like during Boom. Then there's also like Power Rangers has some thick trades that don't use the Omnibus title. So Boom Studios kind of varies from it, but both of these, let's see, the archive Bill and Ted was 25, and this was 30, and I think I've seen them go about 35. So it's kind of an interesting variance. And then for Dark Horse, they have omnibus editions as well that get paperback. So this is the paperback edition of the BPRD Hell on Earth Omnibus 3. This was $30, contains about 3 trade paperbacks worth of stuff, which is pretty good. But not all paperback omnibuses have hardcovers. For example, the Hellboy Omnibus line is only in the paperback. But again, both Boom and Dark Horse love to use omnibus for thick trades, which is not consistent with how Marvel and DC use omnibus, as we'll talk about later. So staying in the world of thick trade paperbacks, one of the most famous lines is Marvel's Epic Collection. One of my favorites, I've talked about it before. These contain essentially roughly about 20 issues of a classic series, and there is a modern format that collects about 12 issues of a modern series. But Epic Collections are meant to be sort of a year-by-year collection. So whereas the complete collections or the saga will focus on a single character or a creator, Epic Collections are strived to collect everything for a line. So for example, for X-Men here, this is the Brood Saga. You'll notice the spine does not have a number on it, but they are still numbered. So you can see that Epic Collection 9, which is covering 1982 and 1983 for the X-Men and contains all the comics that came out for that team in that period. So you have, like for example, this volume is Uncanny X-Men 154 to 167, Annual 6, and material from the Special Edition X-Men comic. Which is usually like, you know, kind of some backup bonus material. These range in price from $40 to $50, depending on the page count. But this is like Marvel's premier paperback collection format, and sometimes covers gaps that the omnibuses miss. Because they aren't creator focused, they are focused on a specific team or character. So X-Men, Ghost Rider, Silver Surfer. The idea is they don't publish them sequentially, but that they have a plan to publish everything eventually. Which is why like 9 is out, but I don't think we have 10, for example. So it can be a little frustrating if you're trying to read everything in order, but eventually the collection will be complete, and they reprint older titles a lot, and there's hundreds of Epic Collections over like the last 10 years. Now DC has a new line of books coming out called DC Finest, which haven't come out yet, so I don't have a physical example, but those are set to be about 600 pages, and they cover a few years' time of a character. So kind of like how Epic Collection mentions on the back the year range, that'll be on the spine for DC Finest. And those aren't also published sequentially. We don't exactly know what the full plan is on those, but I'm looking forward to seeing how those turn out, because I kind of like this. Here's just a couple years of a character's history, and that's a fun way to collect. Now, IDW has a similar format to this. There's the Library Collection, which is for Star Trek, Godzilla, and Dungeons & Dragons, where they recollect things by continuity group. So with Godzilla and Star Trek, I know in particular, they jump around the timeline of each universe. So for Star Trek, this first library collection is all the Kelvin Universe prequel comics to the first Star Trek 2009 film. And so that is the recollection. So it's not a chronological collection. It's not a reading order collection, but this one is this. The second one is TNG Comics. The third one, I think, is Star Trek Year 4 for the original series. So they're grouped together, and they're about 3 trade paperbacks worth. And they cost about $30, which is not bad. And it's kind of a similar sort of thing to Epic Collection, except they're grouping them by continuity. But then if you want reading order, the IDW collections are the way to go. Now, these are in a hardcover format that is a larger size. This is a large size hardcover, but they also reprint them into paperbacks as well. But the IDW collection, currently it's Sonic and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They've also done Transformers and G.I. Joe. These are chronological reading order for IDW's own continuity of these books. So if you pick these up, these are the reading order that is intended for these titles, which is really nice because this contains issues 1 through 12 of Sonic, but then the following volume starts inserting the one-shots, the miniseries, that kind of thing. And I find these are the best way to collect a lot of the IDW universe titles like Sonic, Turtles, etc. But these are hardcovers first, and then they do paperbacks many years later. So, for example, there hasn't been any paperbacks for Sonic yet, but there are the hardcovers. And they are a little bit larger on the hardcover. I think the paperbacks are about standard size, but that is kind of like a nice, if you want to collect a certain run like Sonic, these are the best collections to get because it has everything in order. Okay, so next up we have hardcovers. There's two types of hardcovers, standard size and oversize. Standard size hardcovers, like this Batman 89, same size as a trade paperback as a single issue. You can see that it's not much larger. It's a little bit different because it is, of course, a hardcover. They have done these at DC. DC still does these. Marvel used to do these in two formats where it was like basically a hardcover of a trade paperback or a collection of an iconic story. They kind of don't do these anymore. IDW does standard size hardcovers listed as deluxe editions. So you can see that even though this is a standard size, edition, it is still called the G.I. Joe Deluxe Edition because it's a 40th anniversary special, but in hardcover. So don't let that thing be confusing. I haven't seen IDW use Deluxe Edition for an oversized hardcover. Dark Horse Comics also does standard size hardcovers, which are essentially the same as trade paperbacks. Some of these, like the Hellboy Universe ones, they only get printed in hardcover, not in paperback. And I imagine when they put them in hardcover, they don't recollect them into a hardcover omnibus. But that is kind of like how Dark Horse does it. They either do a paperback or a hardcover. I've never seen them do both of the same book. And a lot of Image Comics titles are paperbacks, but sometimes they're hardcovers, like this book Scrapper about a superhero dog. This one was only released in hardcover so far. Maybe it'll get paperback later, but it went straight to hardcover first. But it's still, again, using this as the standard size, it is still a standard size hardcover. So I've thrown the term Deluxe Edition hardcover at you a couple times. This is what a Deluxe Edition looks like. DC, they typically are a little bit thinner as they kind of collect like a story or an iconic moment. So here's a Deluxe compared to a standard size comic. So you can see it is a larger size format. It sticks up a lot more on the shelf. It is bigger. Some people like the bigger art, the bigger format. Some people don't. Some people want the consistency. So with DC, it's a Deluxe Edition hardcover. With Marvel, it's known as an oversized hardcover. And again, they don't really do these as much anymore because they're kind of focused on omnibuses. But this is an oversized hardcover for Marvel compared to a Marvel Epic collection. You can see the size difference is pretty significant. With DC, they kind of do like these iconic miniseries. With Marvel, for example, like Daredevil by Mark Waid, this is the Volume 3 hardcover, but it contains basically the contents of at least two trade paperbacks. So there's kind of different numbering between the trades and the deluxe hardcovers like these. Because IDW loves being confusing, The Last Ronin was released in a hardcover, not listed as a deluxe edition, but it's sized like one. As you can see, it's the larger trim size. It does make it confusing too because the IDW collections also aren't listed as deluxe hardcovers, and they're actually a little bit smaller than this Last Ronin hardcover. And I have a G.I. Joe hardcover that's this size too. But while they don't call this a deluxe edition, it's about the same size as a DC deluxe edition, so it might as well be. But then they use deluxe edition for standard hardcovers. Again, why it's confusing. But for something like The Last Ronin, it's going to be something deluxe hardcover sized. And then lastly, Boom Studios deluxe edition hardcovers are kind of a league of their own. They are still, I would say, deluxe hardcovers. For example, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Book 1 is about 16 issues and then a nice like thick, there's like an art gallery of the variant covers. And these are, I'd say, closer to omnibus editions. They're also similar to IDW collections in that they are chronological reading order, but not similar in the fact that they don't collect everything. Like this is just the Mighty Morphin and Power Rangers issues and appropriate one-shots. I've done a video on the Power Rangers Deluxe Edition hardcovers if you want to see about it. But in comparison to other comics, they are listed as a deluxe edition, and they are actually bigger than DC Deluxe Editions. So you can see that little bit of lip up here means I have to use only certain shelves for the Power Rangers ones because they are a little bit bigger than one of the largest formats in comics, being the Deluxe Edition or the Omnibus. So they are a little bit larger. And that also makes them significantly larger than your standard size comics. So it is a huge upgrade with size. But that is, I'd say, one of the more consistent things. Deluxe edition means big hardcover, which is nice to see across a few different publishers. Now for something that's more inconsistent with publisher to publisher, and that is the term omnibus. You've probably heard it before. We talked about it with the Bill and Ted, standard size paperback called Omnibus. Dark Horse used to do these smaller size things called Omnibus, which is technically true because the word omnibus is meant to represent a complete collection of books. But you can see this is much smaller than a standard trade. And like I mentioned, the Dark Horse Omnibus paperbacks are normal standard size, and their hardcover omnibus editions are not much larger. I would say they're almost in the same size class. There is a little bit of size difference here, but it's almost like the difference between paperback and hardcover. And actually, even though these have similar page counts, the pages in the hardcover omnibuses for Dark Horse stuff, a little bit thicker than the paperbacks. But it is kind of interesting that we have the two different formats, where it's, you know, hardcover and paperback omnibus, standard size stuff. But some might say Dark Horse doesn't really make omnibuses, because this is an omnibus. This is the Phantom Stranger omnibus from DC. And this is kind of your standard what an omnibus is, I think, to most people. Huge book. This is like 1,300 pages. Big, thick trim size. Here it is compared to a regular trade. You can see it's that deluxe size we saw with deluxe hardcovers in the last segment. Big thing. Usually got a slip case or a slip jacket, like a dust jacket on top of it. There are a couple different ways that they do omnibuses. For example, this Phantom Stranger one is like all of his Silver and Bronze Age appearances. And it's character focused. It's just a huge collection of every Phantom Stranger appearance up to a certain point. But then you have creator focused collections from DC, like Batman by Grant Morrison. This is only going to be what Grant Morrison wrote. So it's got, you know, Batman 655 to 658, 663 to 683, and stories from DC Universe 0 and 52, number 30 and 47, because that is what Grant Morrison wrote. And there's 3 of these, so they split up all of Grant Morrison's work across 3 volumes. But this isn't going to be like a complete Batman run, because you're only going to get the part that Grant Morrison did. Marvel loves doing creator-focused omnibuses, again, because they usually switch creative teams after, or they switch numbering after creative team leaves. But so, for example, the Silver Surfer by Dan Slott and Mike Allred and Laura Allred omnibus is just that. It doesn't have any of the Silver Surfer stuff from around that era if he showed up in other books and wasn't done by Slott and the 2 Allreds. So it's one of those things, but I like having, you know, kind of that creator focus thing when it's this, which is a complete series. But that being said, for Marvel, they also do series based, like Rom, the Space Knight. This is going to be a 3-volume omnibus collection. But you can kind of see, because I didn't show the spine on the Silver Surfer, but you can kind of see that omnibuses sort of change size and shape depending on what they collect. So you can see, these are what I call like mid-range omnibus size, where they're kind of manageable and easier to carry. But then you get something like the Book of Doom omnibus that's like nearly 1,400 pages, and this is kind of like more of an unwieldy book. Omnibuses can be kind of hard to read. That's a reason why some people don't like them. It's a reason why I don't want to collect like X-Men or Fantastic Four omnibuses and would rather get like the Epic collections, because there's so much of it. When it's something like Silver Surfer, this is a lot less space taken up than the trade paperbacks, but I also just kind of like it because it's about 35, 40 issues versus something like Book of Doom, which is closer to like 60. This book in particular is not a particular comic run either. This is kind of like the Phantom Stranger one, where this is a collection of Doctor Doom stories. It's not every Doom appearance, but it's like his most iconic appearances throughout the character's history, and some of his solo appearances as well. And so those are kind of fun to have. You like a certain character like Doctor Doom, who's not going to have a leading book, but sometimes you want to collect something more that has a more complete sense to it. So omnibus collecting is a big deal. They're doing more omnibuses than ever, but it's always going to be case by case with me, because sometimes I don't really like the creator focus for something like Fantastic Four or X-Men, where I want to read it all. Now, there is another format similar to omnibus that is paperback, and that is called Compendium. I've pretty much seen compendiums come from DC and Image, and they're essentially like an omnibus where they're, you know, over 1,000 pages. They have a ton of issues, about 50 issues or so. The Milestone compendiums contain every Milestone book in reading order. The Spawn compendiums are all the Spawn issues in reading order. That is the kind of thing, I kind of like these a little bit more too. They're a little bit easier to read than Omnis because they're paperbacks, but of course you're going to have, you know, big paperback energy more so than giant hardcover. But this is kind of a format I've seen starting to pick up. DC's especially doing more with the compendiums than they were before, and Image is using it for Transformers and G.I. Joe coming up. But where things get confusing is IDW has compendiums, which are deluxe-size hardcovers that are basically omnibuses. They look like omnibuses, they walk like omnibuses, they are as heavy as omnibuses, but they're called compendiums. But I would really call those omnibuses if I were them. Okay, so now we're going to talk about formats specific to a publisher. I don't see other publishers doing these. So for Marvel, we have the Marvel Masterworks, which are one of the oldest collected edition formats. This, for example, is the first volume for Fantastic Four containing 10 issues. These used to go for about $50. Now they go for $75. They are going to be your highest quality paper. They do brand new scans of the comics, touch them up a little bit, but not too much. But they're supposed to be the highest premium format for collecting older books, which is nice. And of note, these are kind of a standard size hardcover, but with a little bit extra edge on the end of them. But if you want the contents of a masterwork, but at a lower price and a digest size, there's also Mighty Marvel Masterworks, which is pretty neat. Good way to introduce kids to Silver Age books. And Marvel has the gallery editions, which are large, oversized hardcovers for specific comics. DC Comics has a format called Absolute Edition, which I'm surprised I don't have one by now, but they have several of these. These are very large hardcovers in slipcases, Ultimate Premium editions with a lot of extra bonus material. The DC Black Label line, which is kind of their adult, mature title imprint, started by doing these kind of larger sized prestige format books, which as you can see compared to a standard trade, much wider, much taller. But then they kind of sort of went away and they went back to just kind of standard trim size. Like for example, the White Knight Universe comics are in standard trim. Black Label's kind of weird. It varies between the wider books and the standard size books, just back and forth. Image Comics has a couple different exclusive formats. There is the Spawn Deluxe editions, which are like DC Absolutes, where they're in slipcases. There's the Invincible Ultimate Library, which is also that same kind of format, where it's a giant slipcase edition. Plus, there are oversized hardcovers for titles like Invincible or Savage Dragon, which are listed as Ultimate Collection. IDW's Ultimate Collection is a little different. They did these for the Mirage Ninja Turtles for the Eastman and Laird material specifically. There was some big old hardcovers and these big old paperbacks, and I do mean big paperbacks. They are quite large compared to your standard trim size of a book. But those are kind of fun. But I think they only did those for the Mirage Ninja Turtles, but they were in the original black and white, and they were in a nice large format. And the last format I'll touch on, Dark Horse's Library Editions. These are larger than Omnibuses, larger than Deluxes. They are incredibly large. These are very, very big books. And they did these for Hellboy. They've done these for The Witcher. This is the Cyberpunk 2077 one. I probably can't even open up and show you. This contains 3 trade paperbacks worth, runs about $50, which is honestly not bad considering the size here. But yeah, these are kind of like their premium editions as opposed to omnibuses. This is like their big oversized format at Dark Horse. So I know that was a lot of information. I hope I boiled it down and kind of put the similar formats next to each other as opposed to going by what the similar terms were, because a lot of them are using different terms. Library at one means something different in another. Omnibus at one means something different in another. It sort of becomes a bit of a mess, and I've had to learn over the years, and I hope I was able to share that knowledge. Now, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I will try to answer any questions I can with the knowledge I have. And if you enjoyed this video and didn't hit the like button already, please hit the like button. It helps the channel immensely. Please hit the subscribe notification bell if you aren't subscribed already. It really does help. You can also check out our live streams here on this YouTube channel, Mondays at 5 p.m. Eastern. We talk about toy news, comic news, Blu-ray news, all the fun stuff. You can also check out our Discord server in the link below, which we have a chat for comic book talk. And a lot of people are knowledgeable there too, if you want to get some more information. You can also find me on social media if you wish at Soundout12 across most platforms. If you'd like to help support the channel directly to continue making more videos, hit the join button down below. There are perks like member-only live streams and early access to videos and all kinds of cool stuff. So hit the join button for more details, and let's give a special shout out to our channel members. Special shout out to all our channel members, including our captains here: Infinity War-Torn, Spin-54, Super Shaddix Boom, Toma K, Jamie's World, SSJ4 Jason, Psycho O's, MasterBin95, Infinite 1985, Jeremy Carr, Sentai Ranger Donnie, Ramon Gray, Muhammad Faiz Daniel, Sutargo's the Kaiju from Krypton. Thank you to all of you for your continued support. You can find my awesome graphic designer on social media at DarkClaw643. You can find Hero Club at hero-club.com for comic news, reviews, and more. And until next time, this is Soundout saying goodbye.